Hey everyone, I'm Brad and this is Watch Rate Heart, and it's Friday, which means it's time for the watch list. It's where I discuss the movies I've watched and my feelings about them. And this week, I'm just tired of these fake-ass films, bro. That's why I'm watching movies that are real, man. About real people, real events, real history. And by real, I mean films that are historical or biographical in nature, but are changed in ways to fit a narrative artistic vision. You know, that real. You know the drill. I have 4 films to review, so let's get started reviewing these historical or biographical fictions. And we begin with one of Russia's most beloved films from one of its most beloved directors. And the film is Andrei Rublev, directed by Andrei Tarkovski. It has a Letterboxd score of 4.4 out of 5, which makes it ranked number 35 in Letterboxd's top 250 narrative films. It has an IMDb rating of 8 out of 10, a Rotten Tomatoes 96% fresh, and it does not have a Metacritic score. As for accolades, it was on BFI's Sight and Sound Greatest Films of All Time list, ranked at number 67, tied with The Red Shoes, Metropolis, La Jetée, and The Gleaner's an Eye. It's on the Criterion Collection Spine number 34, and it's featured in the book 1001 Movies You Must See Before You Die by Stephen J. Schneider. So, Andrei Rublev is a movie that I would compare to The Tree of Life. And that is, it's a film that you would need a director who is not only confident in his abilities, but is so confident in his abilities that he will make it a certain way, and it's in a way that only he could actually devise in making. There's a bravery to Andrei Rublev in a way that I don't think many films that really even attempt. And that's why I think the direction of this is astounding. It is an amazing film direction-wise. It's either from the way the film is framed, to the pace of the film, to the decisions that it tries to make. The second half of the film, where the main character is barely in it. I think he's in a good... No, okay, barely in it's not right. He's in it in the background in certain parts, but he's silent, because he takes a vow of silence at a certain point in the film. And that's pretty unheard of in a movie, where you have the main character of the film that you get to know in the first half, and then for the rest of the film, you don't hear from him. In fact, he's not even the prime focus of the story. And I think in some instances that could fall apart, but in this film, it's done so beautifully with the themes of the film and what the film is trying to say overall. It's brilliantly done by Tarkovski in this. And I was very unsure about watching this film for a number of reasons. One, I heard how brutal it can be. But the other is, I watched Stalker a couple years back, and although I liked it, I kind of got the feeling that I was going to have more problems with Tarkovski's films just because of how he did Stalker and how deliberate the pacing was in this. This film has kind of the same deliberate pacing, but in this film, it's brilliantly used. I think the black and white imagery is also excellent. This is ironic coming from the fact that I just watched Belfast. I shot the film in black and white, and I just couldn't understand the reason why Kenneth Branagh did that. In this film, it makes sense because of how brutal everything is and how depressing and morose everything is. And then when color is finally introduced in the film, it has that beautiful impact that you were looking for. And I think the fact Tarkovsky used black and white in this film was actually incredibly well done. Brilliantly well done. That's the main thing about this film, I have to say. It's brilliant. I really can't find any fault in the film, honestly. I think it's one of the best films about faith and artistry. There's a through line to the film not only of faith and of religion, but of what it is to be an effective artist. Because there's characters in the film in the beginning about Rublev. They say that he's a good painter, but there's no soul. There's nothing to it. It's just pretty. It's just good looking. And then by the end of the film, you come to realize what it took for him to be that artist that he was known for. And I think the film brilliantly weaves the brutality of what happens at that time to his artistry in such an amazing way. And when you see those last images of the film, it's just so well done. Absolutely gorgeous. On every episode of Watch Rate Heart, I not only give you my opinion of the film, I also give you the opinions of the Letterboxd community. So let's get started with Todd. Todd gives it 3.5 stars out of 5 with a heart, and Todd says, 3 hours. A beautifully made story. This movie looks gorgeous from beginning to end and has wonderful performances. It's a real marvel of filmmaking that I just wish was a little bit more interesting. I watched this with great attention, but just didn't have the religious or emotional experience that many claim to. It feels academic, like doing homework to me. And while I was a nerd who kind of liked homework, it's still homework. As much as I tried to handle the pacing, my attention drifted off too much for me to call it a complete success for me. That's actually kind of the problem I had with Stalker, to be absolutely honest. Sorry, I feel like it's cool to worship this more, but I just enjoyed it. A lot of this is what I felt about with Stalker. Stalker, I kind of got why people adore it, but it didn't really hit me all that hard. And I kind of see where Todd's coming from in a certain way. I think it's not straightforward enough to be academic, in my eyes at least, but I see where he's coming from in a certain sense. It's just maybe Tarkovski in a way. Maybe that's what it is. And honestly, here's the thing that I found really fascinating. I only did 3 reviews for this movie specifically, because whether it was positive or negative, or even down the middle, like there's some 2.5, 3 stars out there, they were very long reviews who wanted to get into granular detail as to why they felt the way they felt. And I think that's fascinating, because a lot of the reviewers I come across who write reviews on Letterboxd, when they don't like a movie, they just say they don't like it and why, and that's it. But people are willing to get into very granular detail as to why they feel the way they do about Andrei Rublev. So let's get into the next review. This one is from Jerry. Jerry gives it 5 stars out of 5, and Jerry says, probably the greatest motion picture ever made, plain and simple. Every inch of film is full of life and vitality. Each frame is incredibly poetic and immaculately composed, rich with symbolism in every corner and crevice. After 4 watches, I can safely state that there's never been anything as grandiose nor beautifully and honestly human as Andrei Rublev. Through the vehicle of cinema, we can all achieve divine transcendence. I've got to watch this movie more, but I did find this film absolutely fascinating to watch. And it made me actually really nervous in certain parts. The raid sequence, oh my god. The raid sequence just had me, I was so unnerved and so anxiety-ridden throughout that sequence. And this last review is from Cola Cartel. Cola Cartel gives it a half star out of 5. Oh no. And Cola Cartel says, I would make it a 0 if I could. I just don't see how this ties with the MCU at all. Oh, that's good. Well, honestly, Andrei Rublev is connected to Whiplash, who was the villain of Iron Man 2, Cola Cartel. So I think that's how you missed it. Do better. God, I feel sick saying that. So in review, Andrei Rublev has astoundingly great direction, from the way it's framed to the way it's paced and the decisions that were made in the film. It has really good imagery in black and white. I think it's one of the best films about faith and artistry. I give Andrei Rublev 4.5 stars out of 5 with a heart. It is an amazing film, and if you have not given it a shot yet, I highly suggest you do this before watching something like Stalker or any of the later Tarkovski films, but I think this film was utterly brilliant. Next is the film by Pablo Lorrain, chronicling the aftermath of the assassination of President John F. Kennedy through the perspective of his wife, Jacqueline Kennedy. And that is in the film Jackie, starring Natalie Portman in the role of Jackie Kennedy. It has a Letterboxd score of 3.5 out of 5, an IMDb of 6.8 out of 10, a Rotten Tomatoes of 87% fresh, and Metacritic of 81. As for accolades, it was nominated for 3 Academy Awards, including for Best Actress for Natalie Portman, Best Costume Design, and Best Score. It won 1 BAFTA for Best Costume Design. It was nominated for 2 other BAFTAs for Leading Actress and Best Score. It's on IndieWire's Best Films of the 2010s, ranked number 68, and it's featured in the book 1001 Movies You Must See Before You Die by Stephen J. Schneider. The first thing I thought about when I watched this movie was Spencer. And I didn't realize that this was from the same director, because a lot of the same issues that I had with Spencer, I had with this, but they were much less pronounced. Spencer, the film was very beautiful and had a really good performance by Kristen Stewart, but there was a lot of problems with the actual story and narrative of the film. In this movie, I think the narrative is much more streamlined, so it's not really that big of an issue, but the look of the film and the performance by Natalie Portman is so good that it lifts the film up to something more, even though I think other aspects of the film are still kind of a drag on it. First off, I've got to talk about Natalie Portman's performance. It's the best performance she's ever done, period. I'm talking about Closer, I'm talking about Black Swan. Any performance she's done, this is the best she's done, period. This film rests on her performance. Her showcasing of grief, determination, grit, everything about Jackie Kennedy in this time. How she purports herself, her poise while dealing with everything. She's the entire movie, and she does an incredible job through her performance telling the story. Honestly, this movie would not work without her performance. But she did an amazing job in this. Like, really, this is a performance piece film through and through. and she just nails everything that the film needs to be nailed. What this film does is showcases the poise and elegance, along with the incredible grief that she went through in the film. That's what the story is, basically. What happens after John F. Kennedy was assassinated to Jackie Kennedy. And to be honest, the story is kind of thin because that's really all it's about. And how Portman shows the grief and the emotional state that Jackie is in, I think is really enough to make the story work incredibly well. I also think the film is beautifully shot. There's just some great looking scenes in the film. It's just of people sitting around talking or just watching a TV, and it just looks absolutely beautiful. But I think the best looking scenes are scenes in the Arlington Cemetery. The color and the lighting of the film is just exquisite. It is really good in this film. But my main issue, and again, this is the same issue I had with Spencer, is that there really is no other depth to the film other than what's going on with Jackie. They do have a supporting storyline involving the Johnson administration and with Robert Kennedy, but really they're not all that interesting, and they're not really put into much of a focus in the film. Like, I was thinking about it when watching the film. It just seems like it was kind of unnecessary to feature any of them. Like, there's even like some minor storylines involving a journalist and assistant that Jackie Kennedy had at the White House, or I believe it's a friend of hers in this, and they just seem kind of superfluous. It just didn't seem like they were all that important to the story. I guess they were like a break from the grief and the emotional performance that Natalie Portman was giving, and I think that was to its detriment to a certain extent. You know, it's not something that really destroys the movie. It just is like a reprieve where I don't think a reprieve was necessary. So those are my thoughts on Jackie. What does the Letterboxd community think of the film? Let's start with Sam. Sam gives it 3.5 stars out of 5, and Sam says, the greatest compliment that I can give this movie is that it really looks like it came out in the 70s. It's stylistic. Each decision regarding the cinematography or set decoration feels artificially chaotic and unapologetically fantasized. There's like a fantasy feel element to the film with the way that the lighting and the color is. And it really is interesting to watch, especially in certain scenes where Natalie Portman's performance is really raw and visceral in certain circumstances. And it's offset by the look of the film and the coloring and the lighting. And I actually think it was very effective in that way. Let's get into the next review, which is on the opposite end, which is Philippe Furtado. Philippe gives it 1.5 stars out of 5, and Philippe says, poor Natalie Portman have not had to keep such a blank face while themes swallow her this bad since she's starting in Gatai's awful Free Zone. This one might be even worse. Well, I haven't seen Free Zone, but I think to call her performance blank, or her face blank in the film, I think that's really unfair. I definitely disagree with that. I think her performance is amazing. I'll say this, though. If you don't like her performance, you're definitely not going to like this movie, because her performance is the entire movie, so I'll say that at least. This next review is from Stephen Clark. Stephen Clark gives it 4 stars out of 5 with a heart, and Stephen says, an eerie character study with some stunning performances. Portman excels in this chilling recall of the Kennedy assassination. 8.1 out of 10. I really think there's only one really good performance, and that is Portman. You know, John Hurt isn't too bad as the priest that she talks to in certain parts. I didn't like really anybody else in this film. And finally, this last review is from Sophie. Sophie gives it 4 stars out of 5 with a heart, and Sophie says, I will personally break into Emma Stone's house and steal the Oscar that Natalie Portman deserved. Is this the one that Emma Stone won for La La Land? If that's the case, I kind of have to agree. I think Portman's performance is a lot better. Although Emma Stone's performance in La La Land is a lot different than Portman's performance. So that's really just comparing apples to oranges. But I will say, honestly, if I had the choice between the two, I think Portman's is better. So yeah, in review, the film is reliant on Portman's excellent performance. And it is her best performance of her career. I like how it showcases Jackie Kennedy's visceral grief and yet showcases her poise, elegance, and intelligence in the film. Jackie's also beautifully well shot, but I also think that there really is nothing else to the film in terms of depth other than what goes on with Jackie. If you don't like the performance by Portman and you don't like what's going on with that character, this film is not going to be for you. You are not going to enjoy this film. As for a rating, I'm going to give this 4 stars out of 5 with a heart. I think it's a very good film. And honestly, I was expecting this to be a dud, just like Spencer was for me, but I was very surprised by how emotional and visceral the film felt as it was going on. So 4 stars out of 5 for me, for Jackie. If you didn't like Spencer, but you haven't seen this film, I would definitely say check this out. Very good film.
I make it my business to know people who can help. Unfair. Unfair.
Next is a film about police corruption, and one man blows the whistle in the film Serpico, starring Al Pacino, directed by Sidney Lumet. It has a Letterboxd score of 3.9 out of 5, an IMDb of 7.7 out of 10, a Rotten Tomatoes of 93% fresh, and a Metacritic of 83. As for accolades, it was nominated for 2 Oscars, including Best Actor and Best Adapted Screenplay, and it was nominated for 3 BAFTAs, including Lead Actor for Al Pacino, Direction for Sidney Lumet, and Best Score, and it was featured in the book 1001 Movies You Must See Before You Die by Stephen J. With Serpico, there is a lot that I do like, but there's one thing I really like, which is Al Pacino's performance. I think he is really good in this film. I think the film gets much more interesting and his performance gets better the more and more that Serpico gets paranoid throughout the entire film. I also think the portrayal of corruption with the cops is done very well. I also have to say that the bad cops are a little too heavy-handed, but I gotta be honest, I'm a little disappointed and underwhelmed by Serpico. I don't think this film really gets interesting until about 2/3 in. I'm not saying it's bad. It takes a long time for it to get rolling, and it's by the 3rd act where I think the film actually gets to be pretty interesting. And then on top of that, I had this really nagging issue with the film, and it's that Serpico just feels strangely naive for a cop. I don't think there's a bad thing of having a cop that's naive in the film, but the film is trying to portray him as just, moral, and right, and I just find it odd that he just seems incredibly naive. There are characters in this film that are not in the police force who tell him, yeah, we know the police force is corrupt, this is not a surprise. And he's like, oh my god, how could there be so much corruption? I'm like, dude, if regular people can figure that out, how couldn't you? That I was like blown away by. I was like, wow, are you really that dumb? Are you really that blind to what was going on? Weird. Okay, fine. To be absolutely honest, Serpico is a good movie. It's just one that I was expecting a lot more from, that I thought was going to be a little more, I guess, exciting or a little more thoughtful, or to have more to it than it did. But I just found myself being a little underwhelmed, especially with the length. It's like 2.5 hours long, and I don't think it justified that length at all. Alright, so that's my opinion. Let's go to the opinions of the Letterboxd reviewers. This one is from Sigma Bat. Sigma Bat gives it 4 stars out of 5 with a heart, and Sigma Bat says, a great portrayal of corruption in the police department. Al Pacino has a phenomenal performance as Frank Serpico. I love the way that it depicts the gritty streets of New York, just like The French Connection and The Warriors. Yeah, that is true. The visual look of the film is really well done, and I do like the grittiness of it as well. So I have to agree with Sigma Bat on that one. Let's get into the next review. This one is from Alan. Alan gives it 4 stars, and Alan says, some of the best facial hair acting of all time. Yeah, I gotta say, I'm a little bit jealous. Like, I want to grow a beard like that, and I kind of can't, but, God, it looked really good, though. I have to agree with Alan there. And finally, this review is from Greg's99. Greg's gives it 3 stars out of 5, and Greg says, I was definitely expecting something more exciting, a bit too slow, and not deserving of its 2+ hour runtime. Absolutely agree. Al Pacino was wonderful, though. Yeah, that's, I think, my biggest problem, really, with the film, is how long it is. It's like 2.5 hours long, and it just does not justify the length that it gives itself. So, in review, I think Serpico has a great performance by Al Pacino. The film gets more interesting when Serpico gets more paranoid, but unfortunately, that's in about the 3rd act of the film. Because of that, the film is pretty slow in the first 2 acts. It's not bad, but it could have been a lot better. I do like the portrayal of corruption, but it's also a bit heavy-handed with how bad the cops are, and I found the main character strangely naive to the point it kind of made him look dumb. Overall, I'm going to give Serpico 3 stars out of 5. Again, I was a bit underwhelmed by the film. I think it's good. It does have a very good performance by Pacino, but I just found myself being pretty underwhelmed, and it's a good movie, just not a great one. Finally, we have one of last year's Best Picture nominees, and it's about the immigrant experience of Jews during World War II, centered around artistic architecture. And that film is The Brutalist, starring Adrien Brody, Felicity Jones, and Guy Pearce, directed by Brady Corbet. It has a Letterboxd score of 3.9 out of 5, an IMDb of 7.2 out of 10, a Rotten Tomatoes of 93% fresh, and a Metacritic of 90. As for accolades, it won 3 Oscars for Best Actor for Adrien Brody, Best Cinematography, and Best Score, and it was nominated for Best Picture, Director, Supporting Actor for Guy Pearce, Supporting Actress for Felicity Jones, Original Screenplay, Film Editing, and Production Design. It won 4 BAFTAs, Best Actor for Adrien Brody, Best Direction, Best Cinematography, and Best Score. And it was BAFTA nominated for Best Film, Best Supporting Actor for Guy Pearce, Best Supporting Actress for Felicity Jones, Best Original Screenplay, and Best Production Design. I've got one question to ask when it comes to The Brutalist, and it's how did this lose Best Director and Best Picture to Anora of all things? I didn't hate Anora. I liked it. I had pretty big problems with it, but The Brutalist is just leagues above Anora in a lot of ways. I think there are fantastic performances by Adrien Brody, Guy Pearce, and Felicity Jones. I think Jones works well with Brody, and Pearce is a really good dominating overseer in the film, but man, Adrien Brody is so good in this movie. Like, by the first minute of seeing him in the film, I was like, oh wow, okay, he's doing really good. And then when the climactic thing in the film happens, there's a shift in his performance that is incredibly profound and just really good. Like, it's one of the best performances from an actor I have seen in a long time. Really good performances, but especially by Adrien Brody. As for the visuals, gorgeous cinematography and shot selection. It's funny because when I look at Brutalist architecture, it's something I don't know much about, to be absolutely honest. Architecture is not something I know much about either, but looking at the architecture of what is considered Brutalist, I look at it and go, this is very cold. It's very not visually appealing to me, but somehow this film makes it feel that appealing. And I also love how the film is directed, because the way that Corbet actually directs the film, the space, the buildings, all have place in the film. They're not just background. They represent this type of feeling in the film that is overbearing, that is suffocating in a sort of way. And it's just brilliantly shot. Even in like dingy places, even like in cold places, the space in the room matters in a way that I have not seen in other films matter as much. And I think the other thing I have to mention when it comes to direction is I never felt the runtime at all in this film. Like, not at all. I thought the film was so well paced and it earned every minute that it was given. I have zero problems with The Brutalist. It's a tough picture at times, and it's a movie that I can see where some people might have problems with it, but I absolutely adore this movie. It's excellent. All right, so that's my opinion on The Brutalist. What does the Letterboxd community think? And I'm going to tell you, there are some diverse and polarizing opinions on this film. So let's start with Sidney. Sidney gives it 4.5 stars out of 5, and Sidney says, there are a couple of sequences in here that filled me with a greatest sense of fear and dread than any horror movie this year. The obvious comparison is There Will Be Blood, but I love how Corbet uses Toth and Van Buren's relationship as a Faustian labyrinth of exploitation and creative obsession via the post-war immigrant experience. I absolutely agree. The relationship between the two characters is incredibly fascinating, but I want to point out also the direction of the film and how it incorporates all these buildings and the visuals to create this really uneasy kind of relationship that's happening in the film. Weaponizes even the faintest bit of levity against the audience, and both sides are fucking aced by Brody and Pearce. Yeah, they both did a fantastic job. I see what the questionable parts are now, and I'm going to have to marinate on the ending. But it's truly an epic thing to take in, and I don't feel a millisecond of its runtime. The ending is the epilogue of the film. To a certain extent, I can understand why people are kind of off-put by that ending. I really wasn't that off-put by it. I was okay with it. Could have been better, sure. I was absolutely fine with the ending. Let's get to the next review, which is Cinema Void. Cinema Void gives it 4 stars out of 5, and Cinema Void says, what if we kissed, started dating, fell madly in love, had kids, and grew old together during the Brutalist intermission? I read that the intermission for the Brutalist was 15 minutes, 20 minutes, I think, is what I heard. I think it was 15. And I gotta be honest with you, I think that's a great idea. And I think that's mainly because if you're sitting in a theater and it's an over 3-hour film, I think you do need an intermission. It takes balls to actually make something that long and not have one, but I think The Brutalist, specifically with what it's doing, I think the intermission was necessary. If you watch on HBO Max like I did, it was a minute long. At that point, I would have just not had an intermission, period. But anyway, we'll move forward. This next review is from Justin DeCloud. Justin gives it 3.5 stars out of 5, and Justin says, gorgeous, engrossing, and thrilling. I was savoring every moment and clearing a spot on my top 10 list. And then there's an ending that had me pulling a crusty going, what the hell was that? You'll always get a shout out in my reviews if you make a Simpsons reference. Just letting everyone know on that one. And it's not because the ending is opaque. Instead, I just found it so thuddingly direct, underlined by a deeply troubling metaphor, followed by a sequence in which a character stands on stage and explains everything. Hats off for printing VHS footage to 70mm. I get what people are saying about the ending. I really do. And to a certain extent, I understand what Justin's saying. It kind of feels like the director is thinking, well, someone sat here for 3.5 hours to watch a film about architecture. What if they didn't get it? I kind of understand what they're trying to say. I wasn't as mad about it, I think, as some are in the reviews. And this last review is from Chris Field. Chris gives it 4 stars out of 5, and Chris says, porterhouse of a movie for sure. If more interesting to talk about than stretches of it are to watch. And I say that one particular narrative turn is the sign of a director who still can't quite help himself. I wonder if he's talking about the climax. To its credit, narrative hangnails abound. We learn so much about Pennsylvania. Yeah, we kind of do. I'm going to assume that the narrative turn that Chris is talking about is the climax. I'm not going to spoil the climax of the film. But I will say that the narrative turn that it takes, even though it was shockingly direct, I think was highly effective. And that comes from somebody who is bothered by what was in that narrative turn. So I'll just say that, and we'll leave it there. So in review, I think the film has fantastic performances by Brody, Pierce, and Jones. Especially Adrian Brody has one of the best performances I've seen from a lead actor. A gorgeous cinematography and shot selection, and the direction is excellent. And I love how the film centers itself around architecture. And I never felt the runtime at all. I give this film an easy 4.5 stars out of 5 with a heart. It's an excellent movie. And I know the reason why I did not watch this at first, it was because of the runtime. But now that I've given it a shot, I thought the movie was incredible. It's one of the best movies I've seen so far this year. And of the films that were nominated last year for Best Picture, I think this is the best so far. I haven't seen I'm Still There, and I'm probably never going to see The Substance, but I think that for right now, that The Brutalist is the best movie that was nominated for Best Picture last year. 4.5 stars out of 5 with a heart for The Brutalist. Now let's recap the films I reviewed in today's episode. I gave The Brutalist 4.5 stars out of 5 with a heart. It has excellent performances by Adrian Brody, Guy Pearce, and Felicity Jones, gorgeous cinematography and shot selection, and the direction is excellent as well, and I never felt a minute of its runtime. I gave 4 stars out of 5 with a heart for Pablo Lorrain's Jackie. Portman's performance is the best of her career, and I think it showcases Jackie Kennedy's poise and elegance along with her incredible grief. It's also beautifully well shot. The only problem I really had with the film is that there really is no other depth to the film other than what's going on with Jackie Kennedy. But overall, I think it's a great film. I gave 3 stars out of 5 for Sidney Lumet's Serpico. I think it's a great performance by Al Pacino. It gets interesting around the time where Serpico gets more paranoid, and the portrayal of corruption is good, even though the portrayal of the bad cops is really heavy-handed. But I do think the film takes a long time to get rolling, and I found Serpico strangely naive for being a cop, and I felt that was kind of distracting. And this was a lot tougher than I was expecting, but my film of the week is Andrei Tarkovski's Andrei Rublev. It is a movie with astoundingly great direction. That is from the way that it's framed, to the pace of the film, the decisions that were made in it. It feels like the vision of a master director. It's got excellent black and white imagery, and it's one of the best films about faith and artistic vision. I would have said this is easily my pick for film of the week, but The Brutalist really had me thinking it might be The Brutalist. But I give my film of the week to Andrei Rublev. And that is it for this episode of Watch Ray Heart. Before I go, I need to rant about something. I don't normally do this. I usually have a question, but I've got to talk about subtitles in films, their placement, and the color they use on it. I watch a good amount of films from other countries, so I have to deal with subtitles. Those aren't a problem for me. I have no issue with watching films with subtitles. That said, I've come across a couple of films in the past year or two where the use of subtitles is hard to deal with because of the color decisions that they've made with the subtitles. Now, with most films I've had that problem with, it's 1 or 2 scenes or 1 or 2 instances where it's white subtitles and then it's white background, so it's really hard to actually read the subtitles, or it's really impossible. I had this problem so much with The Brutalist. There are so many scenes in the film where I'm trying to read what the subtitle is saying, but for some reason, the use of subtitles they used was yellow, sometimes bold, sometimes not bold, oftentimes italicized, in small lettering, but the yellow is not bright enough or not distinct enough that it blends so much into the picture that I couldn't read it no matter how many times I rewound the movie. Honestly, at this point, I kind of wish they would just do the old closed caption and do for TV, which is have the white lettering with the black background behind it, just so I could read what the hell is being said. The Brutalist needed it, because there were so many scenes in this film where I was struggling to read the subtitles. It didn't become a big deal after a while, but it did get annoying at times, where I'm watching the film, I'm trying to read what is being said in the foreign language that the film was presenting itself in, and I just couldn't because it was blending so much into the background. So that's my rant. Let me know what you think. If you like any of the reviewers I've highlighted in this episode, you can check out the video description for a link to their Letterboxd profiles, and be sure to give them a follow and let them know that Brad from Watch Rate Heart sent you. You can follow me on Letterboxd and X at Watch Rate Heart. Please like and subscribe if you enjoyed it and share with your friends. I'm Brad from Watch Rate Heart. Thank you for watching, and remember, we all watch and rate movies, but you give them the heart that makes them live forever.